Hey, my own reactor. So we're gonna do something different. We're gonna be reading women of the Bible. You know, they were some strong women. So we're gonna start off with Eve. Her character. She came into the world perfectly, at peace with her God and with her husband, the only other person on the planet. She lived in paradise, possessing every pleasure imaginable. She never knew the meaning of embarrassment, misunderstanding, hurt, estrangement, envy, bitterness, grief, or guilt until she listened to her enemy and began to doubt God. Her sorrow. That she and her husband were banished from paradise and the presence of God. And that her first son was a murderer and her second son his victim. Her joy. That she had once tasted paradise and that God had promised her offsprings will eventually destroy her enemy. Her story. The woman stirred and stretched, her skin soft and supple as a newborn. One finger, then another moved in gentle exploration of the ground that cradled her. She could feel a warmth filling her, tickling her throat as it tried to escape, spilling out in a glad noise of laughter. She felt herself surrounded by a thousand joys at once, and then a touch calmed her without diminishing her joy. Her eyes opened to a brightness, her ears to a voice, and then a smaller voice echoing an elate response. This is now bone of my bones and flesh. She shall be called woman, for she was taken out of man. Adam took hold of her, and their laughter met like streams converging. The man and the woman walked together naked and unashamed in paradise at ease with themselves and God. Now, no shadow filled Eden, no disorder, discord, or fear. One day a servant spoke to the woman. Did God really say, you must not eat from a tree in the garden? You will not surely die. For God knows that when you eat of it, your eyes will be open, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. The woman listened. She remembered the brightness, the voice of God that had filled her with joy. Could she really be like God? Doubt and desire pursued her until she not only plucked and ate the fruit, but also shared it with her husband. Suddenly, darkness rushed upon Eden. It came, not from the outside, but from inside, erupting, filling their souls with sorrows, craving, and misery. Order gave way to disorder, harmony to discord, trust to fear. Soon they heard the sound of their Creator walking in the garden, and they hid. Where are you, Adam? God called. I heard you in the garden. In the garden, Adam replied, and I was afraid because I was naked, so I hid. Sin had driven its wedges inside their heart, and God banished them from Eden, pronouncing judgment first on the wily serpent who had tempted the woman, and then on her and her husband. To the serpent curse, he added this promise: I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offsprings and hers. He will crush your head, and you will strike his heel. To the woman, God said, I will greatly increase your pain in childbearing. With pain, you will give birth to children. Your desire will be for your husband, and he will rule over you. Then God warned Adam, after a lifetime of hard labor, his strength would decrease until his body would finally be wrapped into the dust from which God had formed him. The curse of death fell suddenly upon the new world. So Adam and his wife fled paradise, and Adam named her Eve because she would be the mother of all the living. But her firstborn, Cain, became a murderer, and her second son, Abel, his victim. Sorrow upon sorrow entered the hearts of the first woman. And alas, we see of her, we imagine her not a creature springing fresh from God's hands, but as a woman in anguish. Her skin, damaged by sun and age, now stretches like rough canvas across her limbs. Her hands are restless spiders, clawing the stony ground beneath her, grasping for something to ease her pain. She can feel the child inside her, her body pressing for a way of escape. The cries of mother and child meets like two strings converging, and self is born. With her child cradled against her breast, relief begins to spread across Eve's face. As she rests, a smile forms, and then, finally, laughter rushes from her lips. Try as she might, she can stifle her joy, for she remembered the brightness in her voice and the promise God gave. Sooner or later, despite many grief, her seed will crush the serpent. The woman will win. Her life and times, childbirth. Eve was the first woman to conceive a child, the first to harbor a fertile egg in her womb. Did she understand the miracle taking place within her as her belly swelled and her child began to move? Did she know the wonder of love for a child yet unborn? The Bible doesn't give us those answers, but it does tell us that Eve recognized that life was in God's control. At Cain's birth, she exclaimed, "With the help of the Lord, I have brought forth a man." God's judgments on Eve, "With pain you will give birth to children," was no doubt exactly what Eve experienced in birthing this first child. It's the process we properly term labor. Eve likely bore the pain and went through the entire birth with only Adam's help. Later, Hebrew women had the help of experienced midwives who knew remedies for common delivery difficulties. Midwives' responsibilities after the birth included cutting of the umbilical cord, washing the newborn, rubbing it with salt for cleansing, and then wrapping it in a swaddle cloth. The birth stool referred to in was probably a low stool on which the mother-to-be squatted, allowing the force of gravity to aid in the birth process. The midwife and possibly other close relatives held the mother's hand to give comfort as well as stability as the mother bore down. Women throughout the century has bore the results of Eve's sin. Their pain in childbearing, unites them in a common bond of an experience shared. The experience is an unusual combination of the earthly and at the same time the unearthly. The pain, the panting, the mess, and the disorder connects with the birth of child, are of the earth, of Eve herself. But what is brought forth in the bond between the mother and the child of this experience is unearthly, something only the creator of life could forge. So y'all, oh, it's one more. Okay. Her promise, embedding in a very curse put on Eve for her sins, is a wonderful promise. God promised her and succeeding generation, you will give birth to children. God's grace and mercy are miraculously evident. Even when he's pronouncing his judgment, he promised that the human race will continue even as he announces that death will now be inevitable. Throughout scriptures, God's grace is often most beautifully evident within his judgment. When the world was so full of sin that he had to destroy it, God's grace saved Noah and his family. While judgment fell on David for his sins was that Bathsheba, God's grace gave them Solomon as a son and a successor. When the Israelites had rebelled so thoroughly that cap- captivity was inevitable, God's grace promised restoration. When you're at your lowest on your knees before God's judgment, never forget that His grace is still at work. And that truly is amazing. Her legacy of prayer. Find a peaceful setting surrounded by beauty of creation to meditate on what life must have been like in the Garden of Eden. Think about what your life would be like if you experienced peace in all your relationships, if you never suffer physically or emotionally, if you were never confused or ashamed or guilty, if you always experience God's love and friendship, let your imagination run riot as it fill in the details of God's original intention for your life and for those you love. Then consider this. You were made for paradise. The joy you taste now are unimaginable compared to those that await you in heaven, for no eye has seen, no ears had heard, no mind has conceived what God has prepared for those who love Him. So I will be back with Sarah and her story, and we're gonna do this. So y'all, I'll see y'all later, my reactors. Bye.